We're always our harshest judges and our worst enemies sometimes, because you got these opportunities and sometimes you're like, oh, but I'm not qualified enough. And then the second that you don't go for it, somebody else gonna, get that opportunity instead.
This episode is brought to you by MozCon, the leading SEO conference where you will learn to become a better search marketer. Hi, and welcome to another episode of MozPod. My guest today is Giulia Panozzo. Today our episode is, what can ice skating teach you about customer acquisition? I know, how does that even figure in? So we're just going to get into it right away. Ice skating is a major part of your life.
Yes.
Neuroscientist, now SEO. At what point did ice skating come up? Is it something you've always done?
So I come from a very small village in Italy.
What village?
It's called Tresche-Conca. I don't expect anyone in the world to know this, except the 500 people that live there. But it's part of Asiago Plateau, which is in the north of Italy. Beautiful, like skiing resort sort of thing. But there's two things that kids can do if they want to do a sport, either ski or skate. I don't exactly remember when I fell in love with skating. I know that I stuck with it initially because, I enjoyed it, but I also had friends in there. And I feel like the connection was what moved me forward.
Okay, this brings me to my next question. What have been some of the major hurdles that you've encountered in your ice skating career?
So, first one probably being injuries. So for almost 2 years, I was not able to skate. Wow. And it was heartbreaking because I couldn't even I couldn't bring myself to even support my friends because I was feeling like I was missing out. There's rejection.
Rejection? Explain.
Yes. Rejection was a huge hurdle for me to sort of come to terms with because, sometimes it doesn't come it doesn't depend on you or on your skills. It's more like, that this producer only needs people of a certain height and look. So initially it was quite hard for me to come to terms with that because I thought I would take it very personally. And I thought, I'm not good enough for this one. And then the more I got exposed to it, the more I thought, okay, this has nothing to do with me. This has got to do with the requirements of the contract. And the third one is self-sabotage, which I feel like is something that a lot of us fall into.
RuPaul calls it your inner saboteur.
Yeah. And, we're always our harshest judges and our worst enemies sometimes.
Agreed.
Because, you got these opportunities and sometimes you're like, oh, but I'm not qualified enough. And then the second that you don't go for it, somebody else gonna, get that opportunity instead. But I feel like now, I grew into it and I kind of overcame these hurdles a bit, but those are the ones that I learned from a lot.
So my next question is, how have you applied the lessons from overcoming these challenges into other areas of your life?
Especially for women, we tend not to go for jobs that feel like we're not qualified for or that we're not 100% in for. And I feel like, having to deal with self-sabotage and rejection in ice skating kind of gave me the sprint to do, to be no, I'm actually quite good at this. And even if I'm not 100% qualified for this job description, I'm still gonna do this or I'm still gonna apply because the worst they can say is no. And I had this opportunity, from skating especially. There was a contract that I really wanted to do. It was touring the world, etc. And I thought they will never look at my CV. They will never take me because I'm not at the end of the day, I'm 1,000 others. I don't have anything that's I don't have an Olympic career or anything. For jobs, especially, don't wait until you're more than ready. Go for it, even if you feel slightly ready.
That's a good one. That's a good lesson there. Do you have any crazy ice skating stories to share with us? Any mishap, any horror stories that has happened on the rink?
Yes. On my very first show, where it was in this massive arena in Italy, and it was my baptism of fire. Yeah. There was, in the same show, there was a circus artist and he was using German wheel, which is this steel wheel with a lot of spikes under to kind of grip, and it was like, rolling on the ice. And they put it like at some point, sort of backstage, but not fully. And and I was distracted because it was the very last lap on my first show.
Please tell me this is not going where I think it's going.
I crashed onto it. Luckily, it was like, almost backstage. So a lot of people were in front, so they couldn't see me. And I didn't really notice until I went out and like I had blood on my, on my dress. It was a white dress as well.
How do you not notice that you're bleeding?
It was the adrenaline. It was my very first show. Opening night to me was like, amazing. And then I was like, where is this coming from? And it was like, really, to be honest, really minor injury on my middle finger.
Damn.
So yeah, I spent the night after like getting stitches at the hospital instead of going to the after party. And then for the rest of the shows, I had like this massive thing sticking out on my middle finger, which yeah.
All right. Tell me more about your current role. You do SEO and customer acquisition, right?
Yes. So I'm currently an in-house director of customer acquisition for a global marketplace. I started in SEO with them, and then I moved on into customer acquisition. So there's a bit more collaborating with other channels. But a big part of my day-to-day is still SEO.
Okay. Can you draw parallels between choreographing a skating routine and developing a customer acquisition strategy?
The aim for both is like captivating or like capturing and retaining your audience. Because at the end of the day, like when you get a customer, you want them to keep purchasing with you, right? The same goes for like skating. Like you have, depending on what like aim you have, like or what kind of audience you have, there's different ways to get to their heart, I guess. But first of all, you need to know your audience, your market,
True.
And also like what means you have. Because sometimes I get to choreograph something on big ice, for example, on a normal size rink, and then I get to, the contract, or I get to the video that I'm shooting, for example, and they're like, okay, we're just gonna use half the rink now. And I'm like, yeah, but I should have known that before. So to kind of tailor my efforts, because otherwise you do something too big, or like you, even with customer acquisition, you go for strategies that cover maybe like a wide array of people, and then there's nothing that actually like fits the audience or like the means that you have. I feel like we need to take into account versatility as well. Obviously, when you design a customer acquisition strategy and a routine, you have to, or a show, you have to take into account that you might be, a feathery showgirl or a hippo, like I have been. Like I've been both. And that's because you need to make your audience happy. So you cannot get stuck on something because your strategy or like your ideal strategy only takes into account certain like either certain channels or certain techniques. You need
flexible.
To be open. Yeah. And on the topic of openness, I think it's important to listen to different perspectives, both if they come from, the bottom or the top, in the sense that like a lot of the time I feel like businesses fail to like develop a customer acquisition that's like, that's successful because they only take what's coming from the top. Like, okay, the founder or the boss wants this. And then there's never space left for something that comes from like other channels, other people that have maybe just joined. I got something like with skating, for example. I was choreographing a routine and I made friends with another Italian girl at the rink. And she just started, she started probably less than a year ago, but she's learning tricks. And she's taking obviously lessons to kind of get more skills. And I was like trying to show her what I was trying to do. And she was like, look, you could put a hydroblade, which is like this move that I've never been able to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to do it. And she was like, no, let me show you, because my coach told me like this trick to make it work. And I was like, you know what, like this is amazing. This is brilliant. And I never considered that because like it wasn't coming from a coach of mine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
I like the idea of being open to collaboration, not just with people that are above you, but people that are even still junior. They could also like have great ideas that could also work as well. All right, cool. I'm going to ask you now a hot question. What is one thing that frustrates you the most about SEO or the industry?
Oh God. So I think there's one that really like, I don't know if it's for every SEO that has happens or if it's just like for me, but I feel like there's a lot of staticness. I don't know if it's a word. It's like staticity. So everyone wants to do what their competitors are doing, or like there's one big trend and everyone goes down that trend. And I feel like an angel dies every time an SEO hears, we can't do that because our competitors are not doing that. So I feel that what frustrates me the most, I guess, like the lack of curiosity or lack of proactiveness because everyone else is doing something else.
I'm just stuck on the fact you said an angel dies. Basically, we want to do something that's tried and trusted. We don't want to try something new or original on our own. We don't want to take risk.
Yeah. And then, you know, the competitor does it and then they're like, oh, why have we not thought about that before? And I'm like, somebody did, but you didn't give approval. So, yeah.
Your background in psychobiology gives you a unique lens that you use to view customer engagement, because I feel like you understand how the human mind works. How do you apply neuroscience to your SEO strategies?
So now I feel like it's particularly relevant because there's a lot of focus on the user. So the way that I apply my neuroscience background is by designing tests normally that take into account how people make decisions, or like how people, how people processes work depending on where they are on the journey. So, for example, we know that attention is very variable depending on if you're like at the very early stages of your journey on the site or at the very early stages of research, or if you're like already evaluating, for example, different offers. So yeah, I've been designing tests based on research, for example, like placements of words, placement of images, that sort of thing that I really like because it's like something that you can see straight away. But also like tapping into motivation and messaging.
How so?
Yeah. So for example, a lot of messaging sometimes is misaligned with your audience, and I feel like there is like a lack of attention towards that sometimes. We had one campaign that was quite successful, which was like looking at what customers were searching and they were not getting on our website. So it's not necessarily like an effort of neuroscience, it's more like behavioral psychology, I guess, but it's like, okay, let's tap into the motivations that we're not fulfilling. And by just like taking those queries from Google Search Console and seeing where the CTRs were low, and these were branded queries, bear in mind. So it was like questions about the brand. We were like, okay, how can we make these more, discoverable for users? And so we created landing pages with these FAQs. We marked them up, got like thousands of clicks to the FAQ specifically. And then Google like deemed them irrelevant because like we dropped, like they're not as relevant anymore. But I feel like that was a good example of how sometimes the messaging can be really pivotal in getting your audience, because otherwise, if you're not addressing like the concerns or the questions that they have about the brand, because as a brand, you're like, well, obviously, this should be clear on the website somewhere else that's not discoverable, then you don't address it. But it's when users find it easily, then they're more prone to consider you as the main source of authority. Otherwise, they'll go look elsewhere for those information. And that's, a double-edged sword. Your customers are already evaluating you as an option, but they need that extra information to trust you.
So using your knowledge of neuroscience, then you can dig into that data.
Yeah.
And then what? Figure out the kind of questions that you want to put in your FAQs.
Yeah, figure out the questions that we want to put into FAQs, but also sort of knowing where to put them. Because, Yeah, so if they're asking specific questions and the way they formulate their questions kind of tells you where they are. Like, are they already considering your product? Are they just doing a research but comparing you to somebody else? And you can position those FAQs like differently on the website depending on where the user is on the journey.
Hey there, my name is Chima Meje, and I want to take a moment to talk to you about MozCon, our podcast sponsor. MozCon is not just your average SEO conference. We hold our speakers to the highest standards and insist on fresh talks with unique insights you've never seen anywhere else. Beyond incredible talks, we're committed to platforming more female marketers, including experts like Lily Ray, Amanda Jordan, and me. For women attending MozCon, we're providing a dedicated meeting space where you can connect with other women in tech SEO in a safe and welcoming environment. I can't wait to see you at MozCon in June. Grab a ticket at mz.cm/podcast. So juggling an SEO career and ice skating, I'm sure it requires like a fine balance.
Yeah.
How do you manage to keep both careers thriving?
So I feel like I thrive under stress. So
excuse me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not very structured, I guess. So obviously, like especially with skating, contracts might come at a day's notice. So you always need to be ready. So I feel like there's periods when I know that I have to focus more on skating, and periods where I have to focus more on my like day job. For example, Christmas is heavy, like from even September onwards is heavy on skating. So that's when I take all my leave. I save up my holidays to do the contracts. But in general, I try to obviously like do both and to leave space for both, kind of like, sectorialize them. I don't know if it's a word. But I don't manage to do it all the time, to be honest. I feel like, I put a lot of pressure on myself to do so, but I haven't mastered.
That's fine. I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
You still, I feel like everybody's a work in progress, so that's fine.
Exactly. And I feel like right now I'm at a moment in my life when I'm prioritizing my mental health rather than like being everywhere all the time. So sometimes maybe like if I don't feel like getting up early because I've been tired, then I don't, like I skip one training and it's gonna be fine because it means that like maybe next time, like the next day, I'm gonna be more rested and I'm gonna have a better training as well.
Amazing. So what advice would you have offered to someone who is considering neuromarketing as a career path?
So this is gonna probably feel a bit not douchey, but like almost, because I'm always for like, empowering people to get a new field, to get into a new field. But the first thing is to educate yourself in the sense that like look into courses, look into studies that can like get you trained to do neuromarketing. So because neuromarketing and neuroscience in general are fields in continuous development, it's really easy to be sort of captured by what's called neurobollocks, which is like this term that was made up by Joe Devlin. He's a professor of cognitive neuroscience at UCL. And it's like all of these brain myths that that might become popular because, I don't know, they're on TikTok or they're like in some podcast, etc., but there's no actual evidence behind it. And a lot of the time it's, it's more the damage that it's brought by those things, not on the audience, but I guess on the credibility of the field itself. So that's the reason why I always say go into courses that are like, supported by university or by people who have a degree in neuroscience. For example, Joe Devlin does this neuromarketing course at UCL, and I think it's a 1 or 2 day course. So that's a great start. But even like looking, for example, I don't know, there's the British Neuroscience Association, which is like they send out bulletins with all the latest studies, and it's quite affordable if you're just like looking to learn. I think it's like 20 or 30 pounds a year. There's also a course from Right on SEO about behavioral science for marketing. And I think that's a great start as well to kind of understand where neuromarketing sits, even without like all the tools that you might need, because like there's a lot of neurovisualization techniques, which, as a small business or like if you're not a university, you might not have access to, but it's still like good to understand what the motivations of the users are, for example, and that's something that course covers. And something that I partner up with 2 colleagues of mine right now is a course of our own. So we launched something called Neuroscienteach, which is like this, tailored courses for businesses or individuals who want to know more about neuromarketing.
Okay. And that's it for today on MozPod. I want to thank our guest, Giulia Panozzo, for joining me on today's episode. This episode was engineered by Saul Fox, produced by Chima Meje and Joe Cameron, and our YouTube footage was filmed and edited by Sarah Gaplin. And remember, curiosity didn't kill the cat, it just improved the search rankings. Bye-bye.